Everyone thought she was just a janitor, until she picked up the chalk and silenced the entire class. One equation, one memory, one truth that could no longer be hidden. In a modest corner of Crestwood High School, nestled in the quiet suburbs of Lexington, Kentucky, lived a woman named Evelyn Brooks, someone most students barely noticed. With silver-threaded curls, deep brown skin, and eyes lined with the wrinkles of time, Mrs. Evelyn was the elderly janitor everyone recognized by face but never truly knew by name. Each morning, while the sky was still foggy and the school ground silent, Evelyn arrived, broom and bucket in hand, methodically sweeping the endless hallways, wiping every window pane, scrubbing each worn brick step. Her callous hands had done this work for nearly 2 decades, never a word of complaint. In return for a quiet dedication, she received only sidelong glances, whispered snickers, and cold stares from students and faculty alike. People who had never once asked her a kind question. Just the old cleaning lady, someone once muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Crestwood High prided itself on being a model institution, where children of affluent, mostly white families studied in well-equipped, modern classrooms. But beneath the glossy surface lay deep-rooted prejudice, a world where a person's worth was measured by the color of their skin, their job title, or the make of the car they drove to school each morning. Evelyn had learned to keep quiet. She was used to being invisible. When students brushed past in the hallway, she instinctively stepped aside, bowed her head, a habit long formed. No one knew that behind every layer of dust she wiped away lay a dream long buried beneath her own life's debris, a dream of chalkboards, white chalk, and numbers. Evelyn had once been a brilliant mathematics student, but life had never been easy for a poor black girl in the 1980s. Prejudice and circumstance stole her opportunities, and she chose silence as a means to survive. Until now, when fate would orchestrate an event that would force the entire school to see her in a different light. That morning, after scrubbing away a chalky haze beneath the whiteboard in classroom 203, Evelyn bent to pick up a crumpled piece of paper lying just beneath the teacher's desk. She hadn't meant to interrupt the lesson, but her quiet presence became the perfect excuse for a public humiliation. "Oh, Ms. Evelyn," came the clear voice of Mr. Jonathan Whitaker, the school's acclaimed advanced mathematics teacher. He stood tall behind his desk, eyes gleaming behind black-rimmed glasses, a cold smirk slicing through the still air. "I've noticed you've been cleaning my classroom for years now. Surely you've eavesdropped on quite a few lectures, haven't you?" A few snickers rippled from the back row. Evelyn stood upright, both hands gripping the broom handle tightly. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a slow, seeping humiliation threading its way through the fibers of her uniform. "Well then," Whitaker continued, gesturing toward the board where a complex equation remained unfinished, "why don't you come up here and solve this for the class? Who knows, maybe we're standing in the presence of a hidden math genius." The class erupted into louder laughter. One girl whispered, loud enough for Evelyn to hear, "She probably doesn't even know what an equation is." Evelyn said nothing. She simply stared at Whitaker. In her eyes, he didn't see an aging woman who had quietly endured life. He saw only a prop for his cheap performance, a way to reinforce his superiority in a world he still believed belonged solely to him. No one expected Evelyn to walk up to the board. No one thought she had the courage. They assumed she'd bow her head and walk away, like so many times before. But this time, Evelyn did not retreat. She placed her broom on the floor and began walking slowly toward the whiteboard. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. The air in the classroom shifted, as if all the sound had been drained from the room. Whitaker was still smiling, but deep in his eyes, the smallest flicker of unease had begun to surface. Step by step, Evelyn Brooks made her way to the whiteboard, where a web of complex mathematical symbols stretched across like a frozen labyrinth. Every pair of eyes in the room followed her, no longer filled with scorn, but with a growing curiosity and a touch of confusion. It seemed not even Mr. Whitaker had truly believed she would accept the challenge. She picked up a piece of chalk, feeling its cool edge press against her fingers. It had been 3 decades since Evelyn last touched an algebraic formula, and yet the symbols, the logic, the structure, everything came flooding back, as clear and alive as if they had never left her. The room held its breath as she wrote the first line. Numbers and expressions formed with certainty, clean and deliberate, as if they had been printed straight from her memory. A boy in the front row tilted his head, frowning. Then he whispered, "Wait, she's actually doing it right." No one laughed now. Evelyn kept writing, every logical step unfolding with clarity and precision, so much so that even the top students in the class found themselves holding their breath, trying to keep up. She paused once, furrowed her brow at one part, then gently erased it with the sleeve of her sweater and replaced it with an even more elegant expression. A quiet "wow" escaped from the middle row. Another student turned to their neighbor and whispered, "She's a genius, isn't she?" Mr. Whitaker still stood there, arms crossed, but the smug grin he wore earlier had long since vanished. Sweat dotted his forehead, and his eyes darted between disbelief and rising panic. He was used to ruling this classroom, commanding the attention of students with his air of absolute authority. But now, in front of him stood a black woman with chalk-streaked fingers, dismantling his arrogant certainty with the one thing he valued most: knowledge. When Evelyn placed a piece of chalk down on the desk, the classroom fell into a strange hush. A few students began to clap softly, and then the entire class stood up, erupting into loud, genuine applause, echoing to the room with unfiltered excitement and awe. Evelyn didn't bow her head. She didn't smile. She simply turned around and looked straight into Whitaker's eyes that now held not a trace of mockery. And in a soft but steady voice, she said, "This problem kept me up for a whole week back in 1982. Thank you, sir, for giving me a chance to finish it." In that moment when the chalk first touched the whiteboard, it was as if a door cracked open in Evelyn Brooks' mind. Every symbol, every number wasn't just a tool to solve a math problem. There were threads pulling her back through time, into the memories of a youth long buried under the dust of years. That year, Evelyn was only 20, one of the few black students in the mathematics department at Langston University, one of the most prestigious schools on the East Coast. Her heart burned with the dream of becoming a mathematician. Not just to prove her worth, but to carve out a new path for other young black women like herself. She remembered the sleepless nights by the dorm window, solving systems of differential equations while listening to the cold wind whistling past the old stone buildings. And she could never forget the stares when she walked into lecture halls, or the sharp whispers like tiny needles. What's she doing here? Langston's not for girls from the projects. The professors didn't need to say a word. One raised eyebrow when Evelyn asked a question, or the indifferent glance when she submitted her work. Those said enough. They never saw her as belonging to that world. Things got worse when her father, a day laborer with calloused hands from hauling bricks, fell from a 12-foot scaffold and could no longer work. The family spiraled into crisis. Every dollar of tuition became a weight too heavy to carry. Evelyn stood between two choices: chase her dream or return home to support her family. And she chose sacrifice. The day she left Langston, she stood silently by the campus gate for a long time, clutching her last folder of notes as if trying to hold on to something that had already slipped from her grasp. She promised herself she would return, become someone they couldn't ignore. But life swept her along. The years passed, and that dream fell into slumber until this morning. Back in the present, Evelyn still stood at the whiteboard. The equations continued to flow, but inside her, there was no anger, only reconciliation with the past, with the hidden wounds. Today, she wasn't just solving a math problem. She was rewriting her own history. One heartbeat passed, then another. In the front row, a girl named Chelsea, who had scoffed when Evelyn first entered the classroom, now sat with her mouth agape, her cheeks flush red. She tugged on her friend's sleeve, as if to check if this was really happening. In the back, Malik, the top math student in the class, lowered his head to his desk and whispered, "She really solved it?" No one responded, because they all already knew the answer. Mr. Whitaker, the teacher who had always believed his intellect to be beyond question, now stood frozen. His eyes scanned the equations, flickering across the numbers as if desperately searching for an error. Any error, no matter how small. But it was useless. Everything was too perfect, too precise. He swallowed hard and took a few steps forward, trying to maintain his composure. "Let me just double-check," he said, his voice rough and hoarse. But instead of making corrections, he simply stared at the board for a long time, then turned back to face Evelyn, his gaze marked by a rare hint of confusion. Evelyn said nothing. She merely placed a piece of white chalk down on the tray, as gently as if finishing a routine task. But in her heart, it was the victory of a lifetime. A white student sitting near the door suddenly stood up and began to clap once, then twice. The applause spread like ripples, slowly engulfing the classroom. It wasn't applause born of excitement. It was reverence. At that moment, Evelyn turned to face the class, her eyes calm yet unwavering. "I don't need you to call me a genius," she said softly. "I just want you to know that intelligence has no color, and perseverance knows no age." The room fell silent again, but this time not out of shock, out of understanding. That day, no one left the classroom the same, because they all knew they had just witnessed something remarkable. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, but no one rushed to pack up. Every pair of eyes followed Evelyn Brooks, the woman they had once dismissed as the old janitor, as she walked slowly toward the door, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But everything had changed, and they felt it more than anyone. Chelsea lowered her gaze as Evelyn passed by, her eyes filled with hesitation, unsure how to offer an apology. Malik, still holding his pen, straightened in his seat and quietly said, "Ms. Brooks, thank you." His voice cracked with sincerity. Evelyn offered a faint smile, not the polite smile she wore to endure, but a genuine one, as if a part of her heart had just begun to heal. At the teacher's desk, Mr. Whitaker remained motionless, his shoulders slumped slightly, as though the very weight of his pride had finally been lifted. He watched Evelyn walk out of the room through the open door, then turned to stare at the blackboard, where the flawless solution remained untouched. In that moment, he felt smaller than he ever had before. "I've lived in arrogance for too long," he muttered to himself. Later that afternoon, pale sunlight streamed through the small window of the supply room tucked away in the basement hallway. Evelyn was organizing bottles of floor cleaner and rolling up trash bags into neat bundles. The familiar scent of bleach lingered in the air, the scent of years of quiet labor, of a life hidden behind closed doors. The door creaked open, then gently closed again. Slow footsteps echoed across the linoleum. "Ms. Brooks." Evelyn turned. It was Mr. Whitaker. No longer in his usual crisp suit, he wore a gray turtleneck sweater. His normally slick-back hair was slightly tousled, mirroring the disarray of his thoughts. He stood there, hat in hand, his eyes stripped of their usual confidence, replaced instead with uncertainty and remorse. "May I have a few minutes of your time?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Evelyn nodded, still lightly wiping a cloth in her hand, more out of habit than need. He stepped inside, and the air in the small room suddenly felt heavy with silence. "I came to say, I'm sorry," he began, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected sincerity. "I was wrong, not just in how I treated you today, but for all the years before. I carried my prejudice around without ever realizing how deeply it had taken root." Evelyn listened quietly. She said nothing, but her eyes remained open, not angry, only waiting. "You've made me, and that entire classroom, realize something I never learned in all my years of teaching, that intelligence doesn't come in particular color, and dignity isn't measured by profession." Whitaker exhaled, as if releasing the weight of his own shame. "You don't owe me forgiveness, but I want you to know, because of you, I've learned the most important lesson of my life, and I'll never teach anyone again with the same old lens." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. A small smile, but one filled with gravity. "You don't need forgiveness," she said softly. "You just need to remember. Change doesn't start with a lecture. It starts with your attitude." In that small room, two people once separated by assumptions found common ground, where truth, sincerity, and a little courage had erased a lifetime of silence. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the fog windows, casting a soft golden glow across the floor of Emerson High's hallway. Evelyn Brooks pushed her cleaning cart along the corridor as she always did. But today, the gazes that followed her weren't cold or dismissive. Students smiled, Some nodded respectfully. A boy with messy brown hair even called out shyly, "Good morning, Mrs. Brooks," before dashing off to class. Evelyn smiled without saying a word, but a quiet warmth bloomed in her chest, like morning sun slipping gently through the clouds. That afternoon, while she was mopping the third-floor hallway, Whitaker appeared again, this time holding 2 cups of coffee from the cafe near campus. He hovered awkwardly beside her cart, the familiar arrogance long gone from his eyes. "I wasn't sure if you preferred black coffee or with cream," he said, sounding unsure. "So I brought one of each." Evelyn looked at him for a moment, then took the black coffee with a small nod. "Thank you. I've always liked it bitter," she said, her eyes glinting with quiet humor. The two of them stood by the hallway railing, sipping their coffee in silence. A few students passed by, greeting Evelyn with genuine smiles. No more cold glances, no more mocking chuckles. One group of friends even paused to bow their heads respectfully, a gesture no one had ever offered her before. Evelyn took a sip, her eyes drifting out over the school courtyard. Her heart felt light. She didn't need applause. She only needed a change in the way people looked at her, and today, at last, she had it. After Mr. Whitaker left, Evelyn returned to her work. As she was wiping down tables in the school's main hallway, a voice called out, gentle but firm, "Mrs. Brooks, may I have a few minutes of your time?" It was Mr. David Hargrove, the school principal, a Latino man with a calm demeanor, sharp eyes, and a schedule so packed that most people only saw him in the hallways during special events. He invited her into his office. The wood-paneled room felt a world apart from the cramped storage closet Evelyn was used to, but she remained composed as always. "Yesterday's events have spread throughout the school," he began. "I want to tell you how deeply I admire you, not just for your exceptional intelligence, but for the grace and dignity with which you carried yourself." Evelyn gave a quiet nod. "That's why," he continued, "I'd like to formally offer you a part-time teaching position for our advanced math class. Just 2 sessions a week. Not because we're short-staffed, but because I believe our students have so much to learn from you." It was a prestigious offer, seemingly the perfect, triumphant ending to an inspiring story. But Evelyn simply smiled, her eyes calm with the weight of lived experience. "Thank you, truly," she said, "but I don't need a title to know my worth." The principal was taken aback for a moment, then slowly nodded. "I understand. Instead of standing at the front of a classroom, I want what I do to remain a reminder that everyone deserves respect, whether they hold a broom or a pen." In Mr. Hargrove's nod was a deep, unspoken reverence. Evelyn left the office and returned to her usual tasks. But every step she took now left a different kind of mark. Not water trails on polished floors, but quiet awakening in the hearts of those who had once carried silent prejudice. Within days of her conversation with Principal Hargrove, the story of the janitor who solved the school's hardest math problem had spread through every corner of Crestwood High. It wasn't just students and faculty talking now. Parents, neighbors, and even local journalists were abuzz. A regional newspaper ran a feature titled, "Evelyn Brooks, the quiet symbol of wisdom and dignity," alongside a photograph of her standing by a chalkboard, the white chalk marking still visible. But what moved Evelyn most wasn't the praise. It was what happened one Thursday afternoon. She was cleaning the stairwell behind Building B when a girl from 11th grade named Sophia Delgado approached, holding a thick math notebook in her hands. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm sorry if I'm bothering you, but could I ask you something?" Evelyn paused, set her mop aside, and gave a gentle nod. I used to be really scared of math. But after I heard what you did in Mr. Whitaker's class, something changed in me. I want to try again. I don't expect to be as good as you, but I just want to stop feeling like a failure every time I look at an equation." Evelyn looked into the girl's eyes filled with a familiar insecurity she once saw in herself. She pulled a plastic chair from a nearby storage room and sat beside Sophia. "All right," she smiled gently. "I think we can start by believing we're not losers." From that afternoon on, the hallway behind Building B became a secret study spot for a handful of students, those who had once given up on math, now seeking out Evelyn not because she was a teacher, but because she understood what it felt like to be underestimated. The movement soon caught the attention of faculty. Some teachers hesitated at first, but eventually joined in. Crestwood High launched a Diversity Appreciation Week, where students shared stories of bias, discrimination, and awakening. A student group even launched a project called the Evelyn Effect, a series of short videos documenting her story and the journeys of others who had risen above prejudice. Evelyn never imagined her quiet life could touch so many hearts. She still declined to become a teacher, but in the eyes of everyone, she was a guide, a quiet reminder that respect doesn't come from titles, but from how we live. Spring arrived with gentle rays of sunlight spilling into every corridor at Crestwood High. The cherry tree behind Building B began to bloom, right where Evelyn had once quietly sat with Sophia and the first students who believed in second chances. Now, whenever Evelyn walked through the school grounds, students bowed their heads in genuine respect, gone were the cold stares and sideways glances. In their place was silent admiration for the woman who still wore her janitor's uniform, still carried her water bucket, but walked with a grace that had transformed the entire school. Principal Hargrove had mentioned her name many times in school-wide assemblies. Mr. Whitaker, once the source of humiliation, had become a leading voice in the school's Inner Worth Initiative, a new program aimed at teaching respect, dignity, and fairness in education. But Evelyn sought no accolades. She refused awards and declined honors. When reporters came to interview her, she offered only one simple sentence: "I'm just doing my job, both in cleaning floors and helping people believe in themselves." One day, a female student asked her if she ever regretted not becoming a mathematician. Evelyn placed her hand over her heart and gave a soft laugh. "No, sweetheart, dreams don't disappear. They just change form. Now, they live on through your eyes and through the children who once thought they weren't good enough." Evelyn's story slowly became legend at Crestwood High. But what made it special was that it didn't just live in memory. It existed every day, in every kind gesture, in every look that no longer carried prejudice, and in the growing belief that everyone has value. The woman who had spent a lifetime in quiet obscurity had finally spoken, through the most genuine voice of all, the way she lived. And like the numbers she once wrote across the chalkboard, Evelyn's mark could never be erased. It became the final lesson, and perhaps the most important one, that any student at Crestwood High would ever learn. The true worth of a person isn't in what they wear, but in what they leave behind in the hearts of others.